Welcome everybody into the next edition of the 401 Conversations podcast, your now long-running 401 Conversations podcast. And I am lucky enough to be joined today by Russ Kimberlin from the Kimberlin Company. Russ, we are going to be talking 401k plan audits today. I teased on that on the last episode where I had Thad with me. And so for this one, before we jump into all of that fun stuff, let's talk a little bit about you. Give us a little bit of background on yourself, how you got into 401k plan audits, and tell us a little bit about the Kimberlin Company.
You asked a good question how I got into it. That's funny. So Kimberlin Company started in 2012. I started with the idea that I was just going to work out of my house and do a few plan audits. I think I had 13 to 14 plan audits that I was going to do from home, and it just quickly kind of grew, in large part due to cost. I was kind of a cheaper option, obviously, lower overhead, and that has grown into today where we're, I think, 15 strong now. Our office is in Chandler. We do plans nationwide, predominantly defined contribution plans, just the normal audit plans that go over the threshold and are required to go through audits. I started back in, that's what's kind of funny is, I think I started back in like 2003. I was working for a local firm in Tempe here in Arizona. And we had 3 401k plan audits that we did over the summer. And they were great. I mean, to be honest with you, I think those 3 audits would take like the entire summer. Our firm now does over 200 plans in a year. So the idea that we did 3 over that summer is pretty ridiculous, but we found that it was great work. Our firm had Fridays off, like in the summertime, and being someone who was married and had kids, if I had Fridays off in the summer, my wife was just going to put me to work. So I figured out a way to market kind of towards 401k plans and develop relationships, and so that's really kind of what sparked it. So in the time that I was with that firm, we went from 3 to about 42 plans. And that's when I, decided I could probably do this on my own. So here I am. It's continued to grow. And that's at least some background on what started this.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it started from 3 plans taken an entire summer to now you do 200 plus a year. You're up to, you said 15 employees. So in a 10, 11 year time horizon there, you've experienced quite a bit of growth. And that's not surprising considering under the old audit rules, and I'm sure we'll dive into that a bit more here with the new changes, but under the old audit rules, if you fell into that 100 eligible participant plus bucket, that meant even if you only had 20 participants with an account balance that were actually participating in the plan, you got stuck with this large plan audit every year. So we talk about cost, and you guys were the lower cost option. I still look at things that, you guys are still a lower cost option, because as I'm out there in the marketplace working with plan sponsors and, larger plans that are subject to that large plan audit, I've seen plans that are paying $13,000, $15,000. So I've even seen $22,000 for the services. So from a cost perspective, let's jump to the process of an audit. So I just threw out some pretty large numbers. What goes into that cost? What's the process of an audit, Russ? Like from start to finish, what happens for you, and what made you realize that you could be a good cost-effective auditing firm to be able to do that, where some of these others are charging much, much more for their services?
Gotcha. And you hit several topics there. Cost, kind of the requirement, the updated requirements. So let's go with the process first. So part of the reason that we've been able to grow so quickly is the process to the audit. So a normal audit, just a normal 401k plan audit, let's just say anywhere from 100 to 500 eligible participants at, we won't even talk about assets. We'll just talk about eligible participants.
Okay.
A normal audit can take anywhere between, let's say 40 to 80 hours. And that's a massive range, right? It just depends on how many active participants you have. That's really what drives the audit. And so you've got two sides of it. You've got this financial statement side where XYZ custodian is the one who's holding the assets, and they provide all of the certified reports. And then you've got the client who has to provide all of the payroll information and all of the data for that side of the testing. So, one of the pieces that's nice is you can, on this side, keep the client out of it. You typically have audit access to the custodian records and build the financial statement in the behind the scenes. So the client has no idea that you're really working on that stuff until the field work date, when you actually have their payroll records, the things that you've selected for testing, where you can really dig in on that side. And so the real key to that is to keep it separate, if that makes sense. Keep the client from having to go in and pull in those types of records where you get into verbiage that they don't deal with on a daily basis. And we're used to it. So that is one of the things that keeps it down. Now, one of the other things that you touched on with the requirement, you hit it on the head. We grew in large part because of the old requirement. We had plans that were, so that, by the way, okay, so I'm going to get into the rule change. So the rule change just happened here in February. And it was a change from eligible participants, where if you had over 100 eligible, you might only have 10 active. That plan has to go through an audit. Well, now it's account balances. It's over 100 account balances. I believe it's January 1st of 2023 is when that law takes effect. So all the audits that we're working on now are obviously under the old rule. Next year, when this happened, I'll give you kind of a personal story. When this happened, I was kind of blindsided, to be honest with you. I was at I believe there was a plan administrator, TPA firm that was having like a lunch and learn. Had some investment advisors there, and they told me to talk about the new requirement. I had no idea what they were talking about, nor did any other CPA out there know what they were talking about, because I came home and I called several other. You've got some friends in the business that you can call and kind of ask, and they had no idea. Matter of fact, they thought I was full of it. They were like, no, it was talked about, but it hadn't been passed. Luckily for us, so I believe it's every 2 or 3 years, we have this amazing opportunity to go through a DOL audit where they select for our plans, and they say, give us all of your audit work papers. We want to go through this. Well, we've passed those audits before, but in doing that, we were able to make friends with our auditor who is there in DC now, which is awesome because we're able to call her. So I actually was able to have a phone discussion with her, and she informed me that, yes, in fact, that rule did take effect, and they were scrambling because they did not expect that rule to take place. So it was just kind of a big surprise to everybody. But when I first heard about it, when it kind of sunk in, okay, this law takes effect, I thought, this is maybe 10% of our business, right? And I brought it back into our firm, and my right-hand person here is a little different than me. He's a little bit more kind of conservative and more level-headed than myself. And he's like, Russ, this is huge. I mean, this is much bigger. So I said, all right, let's figure out how many plans is this going to affect. And we figured it was about 40% of our business. So about 40% of the plans no longer need audits going forward. So that tends to freak accountants out. Accountants are very kind of conservative in nature. We like to have stable things.
Yeah.
It just requires more selling, to be real honest with you. So we've been able to almost replace what we lost, which has been it's been awesome. And some of that's due to cost, but really a lot of it's due to service, that we're able to kind of get in, have a calendar schedule, and keep the clients out of the audit as much as possible. And we've made a lot of friends with other CPA firms that have grown, and they're getting out of the business. So they've been sending plans kind of over our way, which has been great because, when they throw your name out there that you can help them, you want to make sure you can come through for it. What else? Did I miss another topic? It was cost and then requirements.
You covered a lot there, Russ. So Yeah, like you, I was blindsided by that change as well, because for the last since the Secure Act and since even Secure 2.0 passed through, we've been as advisors, kind of looking to help, plan sponsors save on that audit cost. One of the ways that we could help with that was through PEPs, right? Now that world was open, that was like one of the big draws to helping clients get into those types of solutions, was that, you could lower the audit cost, or in some cases, remove that cost. And, I was working with a particular client, and that was what sparked the conversation, was potentially moving them into a PEP. And then all of a sudden, I had, my record wholesaler from one of the record keepers reach out and go, yeah, so I just got news from the PEP today that the audit rules changed. So this particular plan that we're working on, it doesn't make sense to go into the PEP anymore. Like, oh my gosh. And, for the record, I would say that is probably a welcome change, especially to, some of the businesses and industries that you think of, especially like here in California, where it's expensive to operate a business, where that bill every year, that $10, $11, $12,000 bill, whatever it may be every year, is an expensive cost to run that plan, where you've only got maybe the, let's say the corporate staff participating, but the folks that are out on location or out in the field aren't really participating. That's an expensive cost for low participation. And so I feel like it certainly could be a welcome change to some of those businesses that were having to write that check. But at the same time, it was going to impact your business heavily. And I'm sure it's impacting a lot of auditing firms. So it's interesting to me that even the Department of Labor auditor was scrambling like everybody else, going, wait a second, like, if you're scrambling for this to figure this out, like, this is a big change.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you're absolutely right, by the way. On the small business side, it's nonsense when you're talking about, you have 5 to 10 people that are eligible, and you have this plan that has to go through an audit. That's a huge expense. And to your point on the PEP side, the PEP side almost becomes irrelevant at this point. I mean, I get it that what they were trying to do, but there's been some misconceptions about some of the rules as it relates to, say, the 1,000 eligible, or sorry, 1,000 people in the PEP was a misconception. That number was actually 100, not 1,000, before it needed to go through an audit. So I just think that PEP thing was great for the time, but when that rule change took place, it might have just negated all of that.
Well, I think what it's going to do is it's going to force, a different way of marketing for that, right? So instead of, you're going to look for those plans that have 100+ active balances. But Secure 2.0 brought a lot of changes, and Thad and I in prior episodes have talked a lot about the changing legislative landscape. In fact, our last episode that we just put out, we talked about some of the upcoming Secure 2.0 changes that are going to be coming starting within the next plan year, auto enrollment, and the issues with long-term part-timers now needing to be eligible and being able to give access. Auto enrollment, I'm sure, is going to change some things for plans that are maybe just on the threshold of needing to be audited, that are now going to have, active participants that are going to push them over into that. But the long-time part-time thing, is it your understanding, Russ, that those long-time part-time folks that are going to be given eligibility, I mean, they're going to count in that balance fee too, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. So it'll be this, Mike, what I think is you're going to see a lull, right? You're going to see this a large amount of plans that don't have to go through an audit anymore, right?
Right.
And then you're going to have, over the next 2 to 3 years, I think it's 2025 that this all takes effect, right? So over the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to have these plans that go through auto enroll. So so yeah, you could absolutely see some plans over the next 2 to 6 years that go to auto enroll and hit that 100 account balance right off the bat. Yeah, so I think you're going to be in this, like I said, 2 to 3 year window of fewer audits, which will probably free up the DOL a little bit. I mean, they've been behind already, so I think it maybe gives them some relief.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the Department of Labor and your experience with them. So, do you help or work with your existing clients when they go through a Department of Labor audit, or is that kind of just like you're on the outside of that?
It seems like typically a client that has to go through a Department of Labor audit is usually working with their plan administrator that they're already with. They're not necessarily looking at the audit itself. They're more looking for it's all compensation. It's the definition of compensation included in the plan document. That's what drives kind of the in look, or the looking into what's going on with the plan, or why they would go through a DOL audit. Our side, the DOL will come at us and ask us for audit work papers on, say, an audit that we've done. And the DOL, in large part, over the last, say, 10 to 12 years, they've reduced the number of firms that do plan audits almost by half, if not more. Wow. They've found that there were a lot of CPA firms that were, for lack of a better term, rubber stamping audits, really not doing the work, just putting the financial statement out there. And so they've really hammered on firms. So if you've made it to this point, hopefully you're doing more than 10 audits, because the DOL is really hammering on those firms that are less than 10 and 20 plan audits.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like and from the sounds of it, the way that you're talking about it, it's like the Department of Labor is looking for the firms with the expertise and the knowledge, and this is what they do is 401k plan audits, whereas some of these other CPA firms are mainly like tax preparation, tax forms, bookkeeping, but they'll do the audits as a value add to their clients that need them. It almost feels like the Department of Labor is saying, we don't want the dabblers on that side. We want the professionals that this is what they do doing it. And I'm sure that drives some of the higher cost of auditing too, because, as that field shrinks, law of supply and demand, right? There's a lot of demand, but there's lower supply of auditors. That right. Cost is going to push up.
Yep.
So how do you envision the future of the 401k plan audit going forward? Is it your kind of thought on the same wavelength that eventually the dabblers are just going to be out of the business, and it's going to be left to firms like yours that just do Department of Labor, or I should say employee benefit plan audits?
Yeah, I do. I think so. I think you're gonna see the firms that specialize in it. You're gonna see them really take off. I think what'll be interesting, and this might be a touchy topic, but I think what is going to be interesting is what firms are using foreign workers, and what firms are using workers here in the States. I mean, we've found a lot of success with training people on how to audit plans and being able to review their work, whereas some of my competitors have found that going to, say, whether it's Thailand or India for auditors. And so, like I said, it's kind of a touchy subject, but that's really, what it is. And so that's really what I see is kind of that push to see, what firms are really going to specialize in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a difference of service model, right? I mean,
sure.
Offshoring the work maybe makes it, cheaper for the firm to be able to do that. But at the same time, I think there is an ability to be able to contact and work with the firm that you are working with to ensure that everything is done properly. Because I've seen, when there's administrative mistakes in a 401k plan and what the headache and the cost that is just to fix it. I can only imagine what it would be like to have the DOL single out your audit, and that audit was just rubber stamped and not done properly. What kind of mess or can of worms that would open up for a plan sponsor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Russ, that's a lot of information in a short window of time to give. Where can listeners and watchers of this 401 Conversations pod find you and get a hold of you?
My email address is usually best. Russ, R-U-S-S, at russkimberlin.com. I always give out my cell number. I answer my phone all the time. So 480-720-2654. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, Russ, I will make sure we drop that in the show notes. We'll link to you everywhere that, this does go, emails, live, all that fun stuff. And again, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this stuff because, it's hard enough for plan sponsors to keep up with all the legislative changes in the world, let alone have to focus on all of these other moving parts. The framework I like to focus on, focuses on, service is one of those large components of a plan and making sure you have the right players in there to make sure that you're able to stay compliant and manage everything. So, it's good to know that there are folks like you and companies like yours that are out there that are, doing this properly and helping 401k plan sponsors manage a process. When the word audit is attached, it's never fun to think about, let alone have to go through every year.
No, it's exactly right. Before you leave, one of the things you just said is very important. For us as auditors, I've always saw the quarterback of the plan is the investment advisor. So
right.
I would prefer to get a client from the advisor as opposed from the plan sponsor. You guys are the ones that should be dictating kind of how the plan is run, where the assets are held. And those are typically the best plans that have a good advisor. Yeah,
for sure. For sure. We talk a lot about that too on this pod, about best practices and processes. And yeah, you want an advisor that this is what they do as 401k plans, especially when it comes to the intricacies and all the complexities that surround ERISA and audits and all that fun stuff.
No doubt. Yeah, we're just a byproduct, dude. We're just auditors, man.
Well, Russ, again, man, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for taking the time to join me today. And I hope you have an awesome weekend ahead.
Hey, thanks, Mike. You too.